UFC 313 Pereira versus Ankalaev takes place this weekend, and I'm going to go through the entire card, starting with the early prelims, ending with the main event, giving my prediction and breakdown for every single fight on the card, starting with the early prelim opener of Chris Gutierrez versus John Castaneda. This fight was added onto the card short notice. Some information about it. Chris Gutierrez was supposed to be fighting Gene Matsumoto, who ended up filling in for Rob Font and losing. And then we've also got John Castaneda, who was supposed to be fighting on the last card. That fight fell through, and now he's been shifted over to fight Chris Gutierrez. It's sort of been mismatched together. I'm going to lean towards Chris Gutierrez. I think he's a much better technical striker than John Castaneda. John Castaneda is quite simple, and so is Chris Gutierrez, but what he does simply is a lot better than John Castaneda. I like his outside footwork, low kicks as well. We've seen in John Castaneda fights before, even against like Nathaniel Wood earlier in his career. I know that it's not really something to go off of because it happened quite a while ago, but he was chewing up John Castaneda's legs. Nathaniel Wood often does that, but he does have a bit of a susceptibility to those low kicks. And John Castaneda just hasn't had the high-level experience. You know, Chris Gutierrez, even though he lost to Song Yadong and it was a little bit of a letdown of a performance from him, he still went 5 rounds with Song Yadong, who is very, very good in the bantamweight division. So I am leaning towards Chris Gutierrez. I also feel like his mindset is going to be better going into this one. Just last week, John Castaneda was supposed to fight Douglas Silva de Andrade. I'm pretty sure he was on his way to making weight or even made the weight, and now he's got to do it again. Chris Gutierrez knew his fight was off against Gene Matsumoto, but they were going to look for a replacement for this card for a lot longer. So I'm going to lean towards Chris Gutierrez. I think his build-up is going to be a lot more normal for him, and John Castaneda is going to have to go through fight week back-to-back. He's going to have to make the trip over. I feel like Chris Gutierrez has a higher chance of being, acclimated to the area, so I feel like this is better for Chris Gutierrez of a weird, odd job situation in the division. It's in the same location, so it's not like, John Castaneda has to have a massive flight to go elsewhere. But 2 fight weeks in a row versus Chris Gutierrez, who's just been ready and waiting, looking for someone to fill in as a replacement for this card. Much better mindset. I'm leaning towards Chris Gutierrez. We're going to go with him by decision, 29-28. We move on. Up the card. These predictions are sponsored by PrizePicks. Go over to prizepicks.com, play $5 and get $50 instantly to use using code GURU for new memberships and signups. If you go to prizepicks.com, you'll see it right here. New member offer. Play 5, get 50, apply, and I'm going to say that Justin Gaethje, who I believe is going to lose, is going to land less than 84.5 significant strikes. It's a 3-rounder. I just think it's a little unlikely, and he could also win by KO himself. And Francis Marshall, who does like to push up against the cage and grapple here and there. Plus, I also think he's going to lose by KO. I'm going to say that he lands less than 51.5 significant strikes as well. Use code GURU. I've been right twice in a row on this, so maybe you should join in. Ozzy Diaz versus Djorgan Santos. Just going to keep it real. Ozzy Diaz is one of those, fluffy guys, and if you don't have the grappling of Anthony Hernandez, I don't think that's going to work out in the heavier divisions of MMA. Djorgan Santos is good. A lot of stock was put into him off of his win over Will Curry on the Contender Series. I like Will Curry. I thought he was a really good prospect. He didn't look all that good in that fight. His boxing looked terrible, in all honesty, but maybe Djorgan Santos is just that good. I think it was a mix of both. I think both Will Curry had a bit of an off performance and Djorgan Santos did look good in that fight. I'm leaning towards Djorgan Santos here. Better comp, Ozzy Diaz. We've seen him finished a few times before. I believe he's coming off of a TKO loss to Mingyang Zhang recently in the division as well. Not too recently, but he did get KO'd in his last fight in November of 2024. Just got finished by Mingyang Zhang. Before that, earlier on the Contender Series, early in his career, he got finished by Joe Pyfer as well. I'm looking towards Santos here getting this one done on the prelims. Much more likely than Ozzy Diaz. Ozzy Diaz just doesn't seem to thrive in any area, whereas Djorgan Santos seems like a well-rounded, well-trained fighter. Ozzy Diaz does have some decent wins, but Bevon Lewis, he's just kind of sticking around on the regional scene, losing over and over again. Was once in the UFC and fought, I believe he fought Uriah Hall at one point, and he was doing good against him, and then he got caught, if I'm not mistaken. But he's just been a guy that's sort of been on the regional scene, just losing over and over again recently. So I'm not really going to put too much stock. That's the win that kind of got him back in the UFC. And yeah, the guy's just been losing over and over again, you know. Lost to Darren Stewart, Uriah Hall. I don't value that as a win that tells me this guy's ready for the UFC. And now you're coming off a KO loss just before Christmas. I'm going with Djorgan Santos. We move on. Mairon Santos versus Francis Marshall. This is actually a more interesting fight than the odds would suggest. They have Mairon Santos as a big favorite. And don't get me wrong, I am picking Mairon Santos to go out there and get the job done. I think he'll go out there, piece up Francis Marshall, and probably finish him by KO early in the fight. But Francis Marshall is underrated. Underrated. Ugly looking record. 8-2 at this point in featherweight, you know, as a younger guy. But he's coming off a win over Dennis Bazooka. Didn't look all the best, but Bazooka's no joke. He's a decent guy in the division. And he kind of won that one by sort of getting a well-timed knockdown in a round he was kind of losing. And then there was 2 swing rounds in that fight as well. He got a takedown at one point, held Bazooka up against a cage in other moments as well. I don't think Mairon Santos is getting held up against a cage here. He's a strong, big dude for the featherweight division with a lot of power in his hands as well. He's explosive and strong. Isaac Djorgan destroyed Francis Marshall. That was expected. Djorgan's a monster, and only the great Christian Rodriguez, prospect destroyer, can defeat him in even a fight that, you know, if Djorgan's surname sounded Dagestani, he would have been given that decision. William Gomez split decision for Francis Marshall. A little bit of a null fight where not much happened, but that's kind of impressive as well. So I'm leaning towards Mairon Santos. I do think there's value on Francis Marshall here because we really don't know how good Mairon Santos is yet. However, there are certain fighters, and Mairon Santos is one of these fighters. Just won the Ultimate Fighter. I knew he was going to win tough. Second I saw him on tough, I was like, this guy's going to win tough. He has the ability of absolute composure in the cage. Composure. Everyone else out there hesitates, second guess what they do. They miss a bunch early on and eventually they start getting their game plan together. Mairon Santos is like completely in the zone. Like he has zen in the cage. I don't know how else to describe it but that. But certain fighters that have this, JDM has it, Volkanovski has it. Like I'm not just glazing the Australians here, I promise. But there are just certain fighters where you see them in there and they're at comfort. They're not scared. They're not timid. They're not worried. They know what they're doing. I see that in Mairon Santos, and I knew he was going to win tough. And he's a younger guy, and I feel like he's going to go on to do pretty decent things in the featherweight division. So I believe in Mairon Santos as a good prospect. And he's got experience advantage, 14-1, young dude, big for the division, powerful, knockout power in his hands, dynamic, good takedown defense. I'll be surprised if this is where the fucking Mairon Santos train stops off and gets derailed. You know what I mean? I just think he's going to make it to the point where it's going to take someone of somewhat talent to be the guy that eventually beats him. I don't know if he'll become a champ. I don't think so, but I do believe in him as a good prospect, so I am going to pick him to win. That's why the odds are the way they are. But Francis Marshall is a little bit underrated, so maybe there's a part of Mairon's game where he can be held against a cage and taken down, and Marshall can have a very sneaky good performance where he uses some experience. But I'm going to go Mairon Santos. I think Mairon Santos is levels above, on the feet, in his composure. He'll probably knock out Francis Marshall early in the fight. That's my take. We move on. Alex Morono versus Carlos Leal. I'm going to go with Carlos Leal. I hope this isn't a Basil Hafez situation where they come into the UFC all sauced up, which is probably what Carlos Leal did. Failed PD tests before. They just bring him in. He should have beaten Rinat Fakretinov on short notice. Alex Morono is just incapable of harming another human, man. It's remarkable, and it's one of those reminders when Alex Morono fights, and I hate to be the guy that always, I'm going to end up trashing Alex Morono again like I do every prediction video. He's a constant reminder that these guys aren't the best this isn't the NFL or the NBA or football, soccer, whatever you want to call it, or rugby league, or where there's like a pool of millions, and then eventually it gets whittled down to only the best that get into the sport. Alex Morono is a reminder, and I know he's from a different era, that just kind of anyone, if they train hard enough, can kind of get in. I don't see talent in him. I don't see the ability to cause harm on another human. It's crazy that I'm saying this about a UFC fighter. He'd whip my ass. He'd whip your ass. Don't get me wrong, he would. But it's just, he don't belong in there with proper athletes, I feel like. He just doesn't have that. A little flabby looking. I'm going to go Carlos Leal. He looked good against Rinat Fakretinov. Great takedown defense, powerful strikes. I could even see a TKO happening here as well. Alex Morono is normally a tricky dude to finish and often does lose by being sort of outpointed, and did just go to a split decision with Daniel Rodriguez, which I did think he lost, losing to Nico Price in Big 2024. I'm going to have to go with the newcomer, Carlos Leal, who's probably sourced up anyway. There's another sourced up guy on this card as well that we're going to get to, but I'm going to go with Carlos Leal. I was surprised that he should have beaten Rinat Fakretinov, unless, I mean, they were in Abu Dhabi, so they ended up giving it 30-27 Rinat, but he should have won that. That's a great win to have. Rinat's arguably ranked level, even though he's not the best. So I'm going to go against Alex Morono, and I'm going to take Carlos Leal to actually get a finish by TKO here as well. We move on. Bruno Ferreira versus Armen Petrosyan. This one's an interesting pick. He's an underdog. But I'm going to go with Bruno Ferreira by KO. I think that's a really nice underdog pick to get here. Not too big of an underdog, but not bad. He's not just a slight underdog. Like, he's nearly Armen Petrosyan's nearly a 2-1 favorite here. So I like those odds on Bruno Ferreira by KO here, because Armen Petrosyan is coming off of a KO loss. Before that, he got submitted in the first round by Rodolfo Vieira. 2 losses in a row. And there's a few reasons why I am going to go with Bruno Ferreira. He had his opportunity to finish Abbas Magomedov in their fight on a few occasions, kept fumbling it. I don't think Armen Petrosyan has the same option to sort of resort to a takedown to save himself once he's in danger, the same way an Abbas Magomedov does. So that's an advantage that I think Abbas has over him. And again, Bruno Ferreira fumbled a finish twice over Abbas Magomedov. So it's a more impressive loss than Armen getting, although he held his own with Sharon Magomedov on the feet, Armen getting put away by Sharon Magomedov by TKO. Rodolfo Vieira putting him out in an arm triangle in the first round, choking him out. It's 2 losses in a row. The pressure of him losing his career is on the line. It's also there for Bruno Ferreira, but I think under those circumstances, I think a savage like Bruno, who's more of a brawler fighter, is probably going to do better under those circumstances when all of the pressure of losing your career is on. Also, coming off a TKO loss against a very powerful puncher in Bruno Ferreira, who's got knockout power, and Armen Petrosyan's got like Caucasus arm length. And I know Caucasus fighters are great, but it is their like problem, right? Is their length of their arms and stuff, which makes them strong, makes them good grapplers. They got a really tight squeeze. They got a great body lock. You know what I mean? They're strong in the clinch positions. 71 inches of reach at 6'3", and he's not 6'3" either. He's about 6'1". 71 inches of reach at middleweight at this point is just absolutely a joke. And Bruno Ferreira is a powerful puncher in close range. You've got to keep your distance from him. You've got to keep your range. It's rare he has a reach advantage over an opponent. So Armen Petrosyan, who always plays this keep his distant game, is going to have to do that against Bruno Ferreira, and he's got a shorter reach than him, so he can't really, he can't be too effective, which I think is what takes a lot of power out of Armen Petrosyan's shots, because he's always at the end of everything. You know, he never gets a chance to like punch through an opponent's head, you know? He's always just out of range of that, so he kind of has to be in there, boxing on the inside in moments. He's got good low kicks at range. I think Bruno Ferreira is a live underdog here to go out there and catch Armen Petrosyan on the chin. For those reasons. Armen's good, but now we're looking at 8-4. At what point do we say, okay, he's good, but he just don't have that finishing potential? You know what I mean? He's just tapping with his low kicks, and sometimes you got to go with a guy that's got a chance to, well, either guy could win here, but Bruno Ferreira could flatline KO him early. And I reckon that probably will happen. So I'm going with Bruno Ferreira, getting this one done by TKO in the first or second round. After Armen Petrosyan probably outlands him, I think Bruno's going to put him away and finish him, and not spinning elbow immediately afterwards. We got to fix that problem. I know you got a KO over Dustin Stoltzfus with it, but don't start throwing it every time you rock an opponent. You could have finished Abbas Magomedov twice over. I'm going with Bruno Ferreira, getting a KO win as an underdog. We move on. Rei Tsuruya versus Joshua Van. I'm going to go Joshua Van. Rei Tsuruya won his debut, showed some dynamic levels of grappling, but it wasn't enough for me to be convinced that he goes out there and now beats a Joshua Van, who's so active, going to be so comfortable in the cage. I know he lost to Charles Johnson, who's a taller, rangier striker that can be a problem for a guy of his size with a 65-inch reach, which is insane. Like, it's actually sad that there are people still small for the flyweight division at 5'5". Like, the average height of a flyweight at times in the division feels like it's about 5'8", which is the average height of like a man on earth. I think 5'7" is the average height of a man on earth. And in the lowest weight class in the UFC, we've still got that as like the average height, which is kind of insane. So I do feel bad for Van sometimes, but Rei Tsuruya isn't much of a finisher on the feet. Not really a knockout striker on the feet whatsoever against any level of decent competition. He's got some dynamic grappling. He's undefeated. He's got confidence. I don't think he's going to just go out there and just get takedowns over on Josh Van. He's got great sprawls, Josh Van. Really good takedown defense. I think Joshua Van fought Cody Durden, didn't he? And showed good takedown defense in that fight, eventually beating him up. That was in his last fight as well. He was supposed to be fighting Brunno Silva on this card, Joshua Van. Rei Tsuruya is filled in. I'm going with Joshua Van in this fight. I think it's a no-brainer. Could be interesting. Maybe we see some grappling difference, but even in Rei Tsuruya's fight against, I believe it was Carlos Hernandez, he won, but it wasn't like a, oh my God, you've got to watch out for this guy's grappling. And I don't rate Carlos Hernandez anywhere near the same level as I do Joshua Van. So I'm going Joshua Van. I think he'll probably finish Rei Tsuruya in the late second or third round after stuffing a few takedowns, and Rei Tsuruya starting to, you know, his heart's starting to beat fast. He's not getting his takedowns. He's stuck on the feet with Van. And I think the pressure of Van is going to start to mount up, and eventually he'll finish him volume TKO later half of the fight. We move on. Curtis Blaydes versus Rizvan Kuniev. This one's been very interesting to me as a fight that's even on the card, because I don't know why Rizvan Kuniev is even in the UFC. I spoke before about people that are stepping in on short notice when I was talking about Leal, and I mentioned Basel Affairs, and you don't know if you can test them or not. You just don't know if you can test them or not. So you don't know what they're on. How can you ensure that they're clean if you have no testing history on them, and the first time you've met them is the week of the fight, and you don't even have a chance to get tests done? That worries me, but this is a different situation. Rizvan Kuniev is a known PED cheat. Against Renan Ferreira, he tested positive for 4 different banned substances. Not tainted supplement this and trace amounts of this, 6-month suspension. No contest, 4 different performance-enhancing drugs in his system. A roid cheat. And he's in the UFC now. Not only is he in the UFC, they are giving him Curtis Blaydes in his debut. No testing history on him. The testing history that they do have on him is that he's an absolute PED cheat. I know he beat Renan Ferreira, but even in that fight, I've watched the Renan Ferreira fight a few times, and that is his more impressive win. He does have some other ones as well where he's gotten takedowns and held people up against the cage, and had some impressive knockouts as well. He is a heavyweight, you know, there's going to be some wins like that. Do I see him ragdolling Curtis Blaydes? I just don't. Even against Renan Ferreira, he had a great third round. He had a massive first round. They were both swinging back and forth, landing shots. But again, sourced up for the fight. Managed to get takedowns. Second round, Renan Ferreira jump flying knees. Ends up giving away nearly the entire round in that fight. Then Renan Ferreira is just bridging out of Kuniev's top game. So he just bridges out of bottom position. Ends up on top of Kuniev in the second round. And then Kuniev ends up bridging back off of... It was just sloppy looking stuff for heavy. I don't think Curtis Blaydes is letting that get done to him. You know what I mean? At that level. I think Renan Ferreira had a problem in his grappling game. And even then he was like scrambling out of bottom position against Kuniev. And then making a bad mistake of like jumping for an armbar at one point. And not keeping his hips low. And losing position over Kuniev in the second round. So... I don't think Kuniev's got it. I don't see athleticism. I don't see... I mean, these Dagestani guys, you know, the takeover. Good thing they don't get big well. Like, there's no big athletes out of them other than Ankalaev, who we're going to get to in a second. It just feels like once they reach heavyweight, they just become blob status. So I think Curtis Blaydes is going to have an athleticism advantage, a strength advantage, takedown defense. I don't think Kuniev's going to be able to take him down in this fight. He even struggled to get down Renan Ferreira early with good shots. So I think Blaydes is going to have a much easier time of it. And I just think Blaydes is more seasoned. He's a veteran. He's had jail to Almeida on him for a whole round, shooting takedowns, and he's stayed patient and found his opportunity to get a TKO. I'm going with Curtis Blaydes, and his stand-up is underrated as well. Even against Tom Aspinall early on, as much as I love Tom Aspinall, I was like, God, no. You know what I mean? Like, Blaydes is good, and he's timing stuff, and, oh, God, I was wincing when I was watching the first round of Blaydes versus Aspinall. Of course, you can't really get hit clean by Tom, and that's Blaydes' problem. But Kuniev don't have that X factor of just, don't get hit, which is where Blaydes has suffered. Pavlovich, Derek Lewis, Tom Aspinall, you see all of these fights that he's lost. He just doesn't seem to have that one-punch power himself. So he becomes sort of at mercy of it to his opponent, who often has the one-punch knockout power advantage that often ends up beating him because of it. So I don't think Kuniev has that X factor that a lot of people have used to beat Curtis Blaydes, and I don't see him getting down Blaydes. And even if he does, I think Blaydes going to be more experienced. He's going to deal with it well. He's going to have better cardio as well, better conditioning. I think this is too much too soon for Kuniev, and I'm actually fucking shocked at the UFC for even signing this absolute roid cheat into the company. No tainted supplement. No, none of that. Four different performance-enhancing drugs. Not, a drug that can be confused as this, and a drug that can be confused as that. Let me read it real quick just to find out, because I'm massively going to be rooting for Curtis Blaydes here. Let me read it real quick again. They gave an assessment of the things that he tested positive for. And I'm going to read it to you right now. Listen to this. Overturned. Reason. Kuniev tested positive for anabolic steroids, dostranolone, metenolone, boldenone, 19-norandrosterone. Like, it's just not even, you had a trace, it was this from a tainted supplement. There's no, like, confusion here. These are 4 anabolic steroids that were in his system all at once. And he still looked like a fat sack of shit against Ferreira. And the only reason the UFC is signing him is because they want to see probably Blaydes beat the fuck out of him. So they can say, Blaydes is one up on the guy that beat Ferreira. See how shit Ngannou is? Ngannou ain't beating no one good. I think that's what they're doing. That's the only thing I can use to describe it, is that the UFC is going to be like, that's why they've given him this top contender immediately. Look how good Blaydes is compared to Kuniev, who beat Ferreira. See? Any old schmuck can beat Ferreira, and Ngannou's win's not that good over at the PFL. So maybe they're just trying to make an example out of him, but interesting decision-making by the UFC, to say the least. I'm going with Curtis Blaydes, and I'm actually going to take him by TKO. Probably ending up in top position as the fight goes on. I can see Kuniev like failing takedowns and eventually just sort of ended up in north-south on a single leg, while Curtis Blaydes maybe reverses position and ground and pounds him. I'm going to say late second or third round, ground and pound TKO for Curtis Blaydes in this fight. Dangerous early though, Kuniev. He will scrap, but I think Curtis Blaydes has seen it before. We move on. Up the card to another fight, which is Bobby Green versus Mauricio Ruffy. I ain't calling you king. That should be illegal. That actually should be illegal. You can't make someone call you king. Bobby Green versus Mauricio Ruffy. Robert Green versus Mauricio Ruffy is what we're going for here. I'm going with Mauricio Ruffy. I do think, though, this is something that needs to be said. The odds are just downright disrespectful. I thought Mauricio Ruffy was going to be like, okay, based on the momentum and the timing and where Bobby Green's career is at the moment with his recent performances, he'll be a 2-1 favorite. He is, as of right now, a 5-1 favorite over Bobby Green. Like, we didn't just watch James Lontop nearly beat him. And that's real. I know he's a fighting nerd and there's a ton of hype behind these guys. He did good. He lost a round clearly to James Lontop. Dropped him in the first, I believe, or maybe it was the second, I'm not sure. I think it was the first that he dropped him in. Then he lost the second. And in the third round, he had moments where he would like stumble James Lontop. But I mean, take away one big shot in the third that he ended up landing that looked really cool, that got a bit of a reaction out of Lontop. Lontop probably wins that fight. So it was very, very close. Very, very close. And Lontop's unfinishable. He's one of those sort of like flabby Mexicans that just can't be finished. Every division kind of has one now and again. They're like crazy durable. Bobby Green is not that level of durability. but he's a lot better. So what I can see happening here is both guys landing and then Bobby Green getting a little bit confident and Huffy also matching that confidence. And then in that moment where they both start to sort of settle into the fight, maybe round 2 or late in round 1, that's where I think Mauricio Huffy's going to catch him on the chin. If you look at Bobby Green's recent fights, and this was one of the main reasons why I picked Paddy Pimblett to beat him, because I didn't think Pimblett was going to like inside low kick as Bobby Green went in and then Green starts. Because a lot of people say, why did Bobby Green shoot on Paddy Pimblett? He didn't. He was like in stance. Paddy Pimblett inside low kicked him. And Green went to sort of like smother it, catch the kick, or throw a punch at the same time as the inside leg kick took out his lead leg. And his only option from there was to either stay in north-south on his knees and lose the position or try and like engage it by shooting in himself. Massive mistake against Paddy Pimblett. But if you look at Bobby Green's recent fights, 38 years old now. Okay, he's getting up there in age. Mauricio Huffy's got all of the momentum. He's got nasty zen. You know what I mean? He's very, very zen in there. Very aware in there. Good finishing instincts. Can find shots. Especially with a guy like Bobby Green who's going to have his hands down, chin up in the air. He will land a lot. And I think if he does, he'll put Bobby Green down. Because if you look back in his career, Jim Miller dropped him in round 1 pretty bad. You know? Jalin Turner put him away with a brutal finish that didn't look good whatsoever. Grant Dawson, he ended up winning. That was a good win from him. Tony Ferguson dropped him in their fight. Jared Gordon was like kind of figuring him out in their fight, and then he headbutted him and put him away. Drew Dober put him away by TKO before that. Makhachev destroyed him. And then we're getting a bit hazy with some of that. Then before that, we're looking at sort of prime Bobby Green in the lightweight division. He's had other seasons as well where he's done well early in his career, but, you know, around the Fiziev, Iaquinta, Moises sort of time, Nasrat Akparast fights. This is where we saw the sort of best of Bobby Green recently. But since then, I just keep noticing he keeps getting dropped. He keeps getting dropped. And I think if Huffy does that, this ain't Jim Miller or Tony Ferguson. He's going to proper lock in if he drops Bobby and finish the job. So I'm going to say TKO win for Mauricio Huffy. Huge win. Coming out party. And we start building the momentum behind him as well as a bit of a prospect himself. So I'm going to go Mauricio Huffy, TKO. Likes to throw shots over the top of jabs. Bobby Green's jab flicks out there, comes back to his wrist. Sometimes when Bobby Green throws a shot, he steps in with his chin up in the air as well. Like almost to give it more. I don't know how, but you know how you feel like sometimes if you bring your head back a bit, your arm's coming out a little bit longer. It feels like that's sort of a habit that Bobby Green has, just a tad. So I'm going to lean towards Mauricio Huffy winning this one. And I'm going to say he gets a TKO late in the first round or some point in the second round. Yeah. The odds are disgraceful, though. So there's no point betting unless you want to put some money on like a finish, I guess. We move on. Amanda Lemos versus Iasmin Lucindo. I'm going to go over Iasmin Lucindo here because Amanda Lemos, great striker, powerful puncher, arguably a man. She's Amanda. It's like the key name that they keep giving him. Iasmin Lucindo, similar situation. You know what I mean? Gilbert Burns-ish. Questionable on both of them, if we're being real. We need tests being done. But, you know, they're butch. They're tough. That typically takes you far in women's MMA. Lemos has got good power. So has Iasmin Lucindo. I'd say Lemos has more power. She has more knockout power. She's probably better at setting shots up on the feet. She's not as consistent with her finishing ability as we thought she was, if you look back in her recent career. I mean, at one point it was like, oh, don't get hit by Amanda Lemos. But then once you look back in hindsight, you see, okay, well, recently, Dern could get hit, even though she lost, you know, badly in that fight. But, you know, she had her moments as well, where she got position. But then Verna Jandiroba ended up submitting her in her fight. Zhang Weili ended up kind of fraud checking her, which is crazy to say as a champion to do, but she had nothing for Zhang Weili for 5 straight rounds. Marina Rodriguez fight was very, very premature stoppage. And it was kind of iffy before that as well. Michelle Waterson, she ended up beating. But these are people out the way. You know, Angela Hill went to a split decision with her. That's what I'm looking at there. A split decision to Angela Hill. And when you look at Iasmin Lucindo, she's young. I think she's like 23. How old is she? She's 23 years old. On the come up. Got experience as well. She's 17-5. It's a ton of experience. She's got more experience than Amanda Lemos as a young fighter. Just beat Marina Rodriguez herself. Very close fight, but that's probably what would have ended up happening in the Lemos fight if they didn't just stop it because she got rocked. Beat up on Karolina Kowalkiewicz. Submitted Polyana Viana. Nothing too impressive to write home about, but I think that she has the advantage that she will be the one shooting in takedowns here if any of them are. More improving, more likely to improve. I'm going to lean towards Iasmin Lucindo. She's got momentum. It's a close fight, but I think she's more likely to mix it up, and she can handle herself on the feet. And Lemos' power doesn't seem to translate as much to the highest level, so I'm leaning towards Iasmin Lucindo here. Very close fight, though. There's a lot of 50-50s on this card. Moving on. Up the card, Jalin Turner versus Ignacio Bahamondes. This is one of those 50-50s. I think I'm going to go with Ignacio Bahamondes. I think his striking style is better suited for a taller opponent than Jalin Turner's is. You look at a lot of Jalin Turner's shots. He gets off a lot of head kicks. I know that Bahamondes does the same thing as well. He has finishes in that regard. I just think his striking style is more tailored to dealing with a taller guy like Jalin Turner. Jalin Turner's had the height advantage his whole career. So has Bahamondes. They're both going to be in a weird position here. Let's just keep it real. They're both going to be in a weird position here where they've been fighting shorter opponents their whole career. And and they both have struggled in their way against shorter opponents. But Bahamondes has got the momentum. He's riding high. He's looked the best he's ever looked. Jalin Turner has looked the worst he's ever looked. He had a great performance against Dan Hooker when he wobbled him, but then again, Dan Hooker broke his arm in that fight and still dogged it out with him, which is impressive for Dan Hooker to do. And everyone sings the praise, how tough is Dan Hooker? And then you start thinking, well, hang on. One arm, Jalin? We're losing? He broke his arm early in the fight. He's still putting it on you, walking you down, battering you up against the cage, landing straight punches on you over your guard, because you're not used to a guy of that height throwing at you in that way. Jalin could catch Ignacio Bahamondes. I think if there's anyone going to get like a snappy KO, probably likely to lean towards Jalin Turner a little bit more. I think he's a tad bit faster than Ignacio Bahamondes from what we're looking at. Momentum's a hell of a thing. Turner's taken damage in his last two. He keeps getting into these scrappy wars. Bahamondes is fresh. He's learned lessons. The more and more you look at Jalin Turner's record, you realize, hang on, he's 14-8 now. You know? Hasn't got as much of a reach advantage as Google suggests. I think Google has him with like a 78-inch reach. He has 75. Same as Ignacio Bahamondes. So he loses that normal advantage that he has. Bahamondes does as well. Missed weight for the Dan Hooker fight. Lost. You know what I mean? Lost to Mateusz Gamrot. You know, very, very close fight, though. He had moments where he dropped him. But let's face it, outside of the drop, success in that fight, his argument for winning is like on two individual moments where he knocked Gamrot off balance. Then Bobby Green, he beats him. That's impressive. Renato Moicano hurts him early, drops him, walks off. You know, maybe it would have been a finish in another world. But then again, gets taken down, gets beaten up on the ground. I think if anyone's going to shoot a takedown here, it will be Ignacio Bahamondes. He's more likely to push this up against the cage if he needs to, and shoot a takedown if he needs to. He'd be dumb not to mix it up. I can already hear myself screaming at him for not doing so and just striking for 3 straight rounds. He's got nasty chokes, Bahamondes. I remember Rong Zhu shot in on him after he was kind of beating up Rong Zhu. Latched up a nasty guillotine, I believe it was. Just snatched it up on him like Dan Hooker tried to do on Gilbert Burns years ago. Random fucking mention. Or what's it called? Like, what's the word when you bring something up to like back up your point? Anecdote, I guess I could say. There's another word I'm looking for. Either way, Bahamondes has got more versatility, I think. You know? And I think he's got composure. Younger. Less miles on the clock. On the come up. Scoring a nasty KO at UFC 300 over Manuel Torres, who's a dangerous guy. And it seems to be like I've noticed an improvement in him. It's not just, Ignacio Bahamondes is the same guy and now he's winning, though. He seems to be, like, placing his shots a lot better than he used to. He struggled finding them, which is crazy because early in his career, he got a wheel kick KO over Roosevelt Roberts. Ludovic Klein, he was doing very well in that fight. Klein ended up grappling with him and been able to get him down in the first and third round, and that's how Klein ended up beating him. And I think Ludovic Klein is a hell of a prospect as well in the division. It doesn't get spoken about enough. You got Mauricio Huffy wins a terrible close decision against James Lontop. Looks good in moments. And then he's getting promoted to this Bobby Green matchup. Ludwig Klein's sitting there like, hey, I know I didn't look good against Jai Herbert, but Topuria got fucking head kick dropped by him. You know, he didn't look good against Roosevelt himself, to be fair. But he's there on a win streak in the division. I think he's very underrated. But I just think I like it. Christos Giaco's head kick KO in round 1. He's placing these shots consistently against these opponents. Manuel Torres timing as he comes in with the straight right hand down the pipe. It wasn't just, we landed it. You could see the setup. He could see it. You could see it coming. Perfect. Slip back, right hand, that clarity. It's a different look from him that we haven't seen compared to the 2023 Ignacio Bahamondes. Remember, this guy's very, very young. 27 years of age, I think he is. Yeah, he's 27 years of age. This isn't the Trey Ogden Ignacio Bahamondes, or the Rong Zhu one, even though he won that fight, or the Roosevelt Roberts one, even though he won that by wheel kick as well, or the guy who lost to McDessie. He missed weight for that. It's the one time he's missed weight. So that's almost a bit of a look, as maybe he wasn't in the best condition for that fight anyway. Arguably could have won it too, but got wobbled, which is worrying, I guess. I like his momentum here. I'm going to pick Ignacio Bahamondes. And also, there's another part of this. Jalin Turner's dumb. He makes dumb decisions in fights. I would imagine he has a low IQ. He seems like a nice guy, but I've just seen too many consistent dumb decisions, and you know how I want the IQ of fighters on the tail of the tape. I know it. I know it's low. It's on the tail of the tape for me. I'm going with Ignacio Bahamondes. I'm going to pick him to win this fight. Probably by decision, or maybe like a second round finish. I could see him maybe like getting the better of Jalin Turner in moments. They get into a bit of a scrambling moment, and maybe Bahamondes gets a body lock and maybe TKO or like latches up a choke at some point on Jalin Turner. So I'm going to go with Ignacio Bahamondes, either a decision or a second round finish after maybe getting some successful moments on the feet against Jalin earlier that round. So I'm leaning towards Bahamondes. Pressure's on for Jalin Turner as well, because they pay him quite a bit and he's on a 2-fight losing streak. Main card of a pay-per-view. Not quite. Yes, feature fight of a pay-per-view. 2-fight losing streak. He kind of needs this win or he's 14-9. And I don't think they're going to be paying him a good chunk of money to be taking on unranked fighters. So potential job on the line. Whereas Bahamondes, he's living a dream right now. Full of confidence. Coming off 2 fights in a row where he's got bonuses. You know, big win at UFC 300. He's the man right now. I like that confidence difference. I'm going to go Ignacio Bahamondes. I'm taking him to win. We move on. Justin Gaethje versus Rafael Fiziev. I feel like I'm going to get trashed for this. When this fight was first announced, I thought, oh, well, Gaethje. Guys, I can't pick Gaethje to win MMA. I just can't do it. I can't argue it. I can't argue Gaethje to win. I just can't. I've never been able to. I picked Fiziev the first time. By the way, I got trashed for saying that Fiziev could have won that first fight. The comments on the free fight that they posted of Gaethje versus Fiziev, you weren't saying it, but I know what you were thinking in those comments. I'm not saying robbery. But I saw a lot of people like, damn, this fight was actually pretty close, huh? In those first 2 rounds. And, you know, Fiziev started the 3rd round very strong. Ended up getting rocked a little bit and his eye was swelling up in the fight. And then he started sort of wilting as the fight went on. And Gaethje had his moments later in that round. I can't pick Gaethje. It's something I've always done. I just can't do it. And I've been right a lot of times. Holloway's going to fucking outclass Gaethje and sleep him. And now I'm thinking, he was getting ready for Dan Hooker. Tall, rangy striker, straight punches. I know Fiziev hasn't had full preparation, but he was getting ready for a fight. And he's been in shape since like November, if you pay any attention to Fiziev. I've been waiting for Fiziev to come back. So I've been paying attention. Like, what's Fiziev up to? Oh, he's in Tiger Muay Thai, drenched over Christmas, training hard, looking for a fight with Gamrot, who he was supposed to fight in February, that ended up allegedly turning down the fight. Which I don't blame him. He already has a win. I'm sure he doesn't want to run it back if he doesn't have to. Fiziev's been ready. This isn't ideal, but he has had some notice to get there at least, so I don't think it's going to be a jet lag problem. I think Fiziev's going to win. I can see Fiziev finishing Gaethje early in the fight by TKO. Get on to me all you want. You always pick against Gaethje. I just can't help it. I picked him to win fights. I picked him to beat Chandler. I picked him to beat Poirier in the rematch. Like, I've had moments where I've like, okay, this time round, I see it. I can see it this time round. But then I've had other times. I think Holloway's going to do this. Khabib annihilates him in a round, I said. Jiu-jitsu weakness is just there. I know there's not anything to do with this matchup, but when I see Gaethje losing, I see him losing. And I think Fiziev wins it this time round. I was wrong the first time. But Gaethje's switching up. Dan Hooker, long, rangy, straight punches. Taller than Gaethje. Fiziev, short, stocky, on the inside. He was prepared for it first time. If Fiziev's in shape, and by the way, sometimes when you're in shape and you don't have a fight coming up, it's better because you're training healthy. You're not slaughtering yourself. You're in shape. You can go 3 rounds, but you're not brutalizing yourself in training camp, picking up injuries and stuff like that. The fact that he's even willing to take this on such short notice makes me think, okay, he's healthy. Especially because he hurt his knee, didn't he, against Gamrot, and he had that time off. When you have that time off, you work on the other things as well. When it comes to injuries that you have. While my leg's out of order and I can't really train, let me make sure I get this shoulder tweaked and fixed. And while I'm at it, my back's been bugging me. That's good to get some break on that. And I feel like maybe it's good timing for Fiziev here. The switch up of styles on Gaethje on short notice. Something else to note as well. Before Dan Hooker was out of the fight, Gaethje requested it to be changed from 5 rounds to 3. I thought it was like, you know, when we first heard that news, I was saying to chat, that's Gaethje. Gaethje's made it 3 rounds against Dan Hooker. That's a sign to me. This wasn't changed to 3 rounds from a 5-rounder because we needed someone to take it on short notice and they wouldn't have taken a 5-rounder. That's not what this was. This was changed to a 3-rounder while Dan Hooker was still in the fight. On the card. You know? I'm going with Fiziev. I think he starts fast. Gaethje's, and then there's the elephant in the room. And it's me. No, I'm joking. There's an elephant in the room though. And it's he just got flatlined. Gaethje ain't really been flatlined. He's been finished. And he's had moments where he's like, oh, come on, ref. Come on, ref. I was still in there, man. And it's like, oh, okay, well, Gaethje got TKO'd, but he was still kind of with it at the end. He's getting up there in age. 36 now in the lightweight division. I know he won the first one. Don't get me wrong. I get it. And this time it's short notice. And he took over in the 3rd round in the first one. This time it's short notice. I think this is a distinguished gentleman's pick. Charles Oliveira knocked him down, subbed him. He beat Poirier, but he got wobbled in the 1st round there as well. Max Holloway just slept him out cold. You know, he's had fights where he's been TKO'd before by Alvarez and Poirier. It was a little different of a Gaethje, where he was kind of asking to be, if we're being real. And he ended up getting TKO'd in both of them. Just got flatlined. His last memory of fighting is him being flatline KO'd by Max Holloway. In April. He's been out for 11 months at 36 years old. I know Fiziev's been inactive as well, but this is hardly a momentum Gaethje who's looking better than ever. We've always heard from Gaethje, if I take too many more losses, it's done, you know? I know he's probably looking at this as like, if I win this one, I'm in the right positions maybe to get that title shot that Armen Tsarukyan missed out on. And I can see this being the moment that ends it. I think Fiziev's going to go out there and win. He looked so good in the first 2 rounds of their first fight. And I think Gaethje, and I hate to say it like this, I think Gaethje was very lucky not to get wobbled early in that fight. Very lucky not to get hurt early in that fight because we've seen him wobbled before. And I know that Fiziev isn't really the biggest of power punchers, but he's fast and he does have heat in his hands. Nothing to lose. Everything to gain in this situation. I'm going with Rafael Fiziev. I'm going to pick Rafael Fiziev to TKO Gaethje early. Whole training camp for a long, rangy Dan Hooker with long, long arms, taller than you, going to be punching straight at you, over your guard. Now it's Fiziev. Menace on the inside. Body shots, bringing him upstairs afterwards. Big jump knee to the body. Heavy kicks himself. How many more times can I trust Justin Gaethje to ride out the storm and cruise into it in the later rounds before he gets put away? Is the best time to assume that's going to happen the time after he's had nearly a year out after being flatline KO'd for the first time in his career by Max Holloway? And not to mention, he got his nose shattered in that fight. That's becoming an increasing problem for him. Fiziev got smacked in the eye in that fight by Gaethje and it swelled up. That's kind of what gave Gaethje the fight on visible damage in the second round. That very, very much didn't help Fiziev's case whatsoever. I think this is going to be a healthy Fiziev. Nothing to lose. Gets a TKO win. When does it end for Gaethje? When? The longer we wait, the more chance I think it's likely to happen. Do you think we're going to be in a world where Justin Gaethje is fighting Islam Makhachev for the lightweight world championship at 37 years old? Do you think that... Does that sound right to you at lightweight in big 2025? Does it just not sound wrong? Fiziev steps in, 31. I sense it! I sense a Justin Gaethje TKO loss. Early in the first or second round, Fiziev puts him away. Wobbles him, stings him, puts him down. Gaethje's arguing with the ref, but the fight gets stopped. He made it 3 rounds before Dan Hooker pulled out from 5. Why? I'm not going to put it all on that, because maybe it was just they knew that Dan Hooker was pulling out long before he actually did, like a week before he actually did. I feel like we would have heard about that, and we would have heard about a replacement sooner if that was the case, but all good. He made it 3 rounds from 5. Why? A little injured, getting up there, another training camp. I'm going with Rafael Fiziev. I'm wincing at this. I'm going Fiziev TKO early. We move on. Up the card, Alex Pereira versus Magomed Ankalaev. I'm going with Alex Pereira because Ankalaev said that he wasn't going to shoot takedowns and lying is haram. So, your call, Ankalaev. You want to get through those pearly gates up there or not, buddy? Okay? Because I know someone will be very disappointed to see you lying in the world. Okay? I'm not going to put it all on that. But if he does lie, that is interesting. Just saying. That's kind of hypocritical in terms of his religion. But it's all good. But the religion does come into this, though. Not in that jokey way that I just said. He's probably going to shoot sometimes. But he don't really shoot early. He really doesn't. You know, he does wait and he has to build his way into it. And he doesn't often get his early shots of takedowns as well. I've watched the Thiago Santos fight. Held him up against the cage the whole time because he couldn't do much with him. Santos had 1 leg in that fight. Dropped him badly in that fight. And I could talk about the Jan Blachowicz fight and how Jan was figuring him out with the low kicks. But then again, you know, Alex Pereira struggled with Jan Blachowicz as well. I just think Ankalaev is going to get chinned early here. He's not got the longest reach. Steps in with the 1-2. He has got a solid shot of catching Pereira down the pipe. He really does. With straight punches. I think his straight punches are very underrated. Hook's not the best. Not the best at all. If he tries going hook for hook with Pereira, he's going to get slept. I can just see Pereira slipping on the outside of some of those. It's a different level of striking that Ankalaev's not seen before at light heavyweight. And I know he's fought good fighters like Rakic, but Rakic ain't Pereira, man. He ain't got that in him. He ain't got that dog in him. He ain't got that power in his hands at all. And he was landing quite frequently in round 1 against Ankalaev. I don't know what you guys felt the vibe was watching Rakic versus Ankalaev. It felt like, oh my God, Rakic might do this. I know Khalil had moments, but Pereira was sick. And people massively, you know, talk and sing the praises of Khalil Roundtree because they like Khalil Roundtree and he did have a good performance. We've seen the documentary. Pereira was spluttering, weight cutting, like really in bad condition for that. Not ideal circumstances. He's had red flags in the build-up though, Pereira. He's been on Australia not that long ago. But I think this whole time that he's been taking these fights that people have said, it don't make no sense to do the Yuri rematch right now, and it don't make no sense to do the Khalil Roundtree fight right now. What he's been doing is buying himself time to work on the grappling defense that we've seen as a weakness in his game previously. People have got takedowns on him, and I see a lot of people showing, this guy got a takedown on Alex Pereira. This guy got a takedown on Alex Pereira. Oftentimes from a guillotine position is normally when this sort of thing happens. Did they beat him? Or did Pereira stay safe, work wrist control, get back to his base, and work his way back up to his feet? At light heavyweight, the fact, I think he's got the skills to pay the bills when it comes to defending himself on the ground. And I think if they ever get into those later rounds where it does get a bit scrappy and they both get sloppy, that's where Pereira's going to have a massive advantage. And I think when it's early in this fight, this ain't no Johnny Walker. I think this is going to be, if it's an early finish, it's Alex Pereira. If it's a late finish, it's a chance at either. But if it's a late finish on the feet, it's Alex Pereira as well. Ankalaev's going to have to consistently get him down and keep him there across rounds in order to beat him. If he gets him down early in the first, I think he could do work and maybe get a finish there. I don't think he gets him down early in the first. I really don't. Ankalaev steps very heavy on his lead. Pereira does very well throwing his guards up in his arms up into traffic to get out of the way of shots. Sticks a jab to the body, dips off to the side. We don't really see Ankalaev trace punches as much. A lot of it's right down the pipe. He catches Rakic, sort of like covering up, not moving the way he should when he low kicks, not like giving up too much ground, because Ankalaev doesn't have to worry about getting slept by Rakic as he comes in as much. You know? I don't think Ankalaev's front kicks to the body is going to be effective here. That's a big weapon of his. I don't think that's going to work as much with Pereira. He sees that. He knows those. Kicks to the body, low kicks. Ankalaev is like cosplaying crazy terminology to use, I know, but he's like cosplaying a really technical striker. And he is, but this Pereira's seen all that. He's dealt with all that. That's going to feel right. If he sees a technical striker, I think it's going to activate like, oh, this is great. This ain't no weird, goofy styled MMA striker that I'm dealing with here. You know, like Yuri in moments. I know that he dealt with Yuri pretty easily with the low kicks in the rematch. And in the first fight, he dealt with him as well. But Yuri was having success. There's like a goofiness to MMA fighters where it's like, you know, Pereira deals with that. But it's worrying to him. It's foreign to him. Coming from kickboxing, you start throwing like a really good refined teep at him. Good like low kicks yourself. Jab, jab, two down the pipe with good technique. The guy has gone rounds with Vatakov. I think he's going to like feel more comfortable. You know, Khalil beat him by blitzing in and blitzing in and blitzing in non-stop. Eventually so much he completely gassed out because he had to. Khalil knew that he gave up any chance of winning later for the small chance of winning early that he had. By blitzing in, by being wild, by not being Khalil, if we're being honest. Because Khalil doesn't normally fight like that, and he's not as successful because of it. Because he normally tries to be the technical guy on the out foot, doing the simple kickboxing stuff. I think Khalil knew, if I try and go out there and be the Khalil that fought Jacoby, low kicks and high guard and proper Thai style rather than the blitz, I think Khalil knew, if I try doing that with this seasoned kickboxer, I'm getting my ass whooped. I need to be different. I need to blitz in and make this a different looking fight and be a bit of a light heavyweight Whittaker with actual power to try and deal with this. I think he's going to deal with Ankalaev. I think he sleeps him early. Ankalaev, a training partner of his, and someone that he actually fights very similarly to, if you actually study the two of them, is Sean Strickland. I know. Ankalaev does different things than Strickland. He'll mix it up more. He will grapple more. He'll throw a head kick. He'll do different things than Strickland does. But when you look at him walking forward, encroaching in, slowly pressuring his opponent backwards as the fight goes on, teep, slowly pressuring, jab two, jab, slowly pressuring, teep, jab, jab two. King. Real easy win for Pereira in that one. And I think he's only getting better. And I think he knows this is his big test. Full preparation. Launch. And then again, I mentioned religion earlier, but I never even fully got into it. We're in Ramadan. He can't drink for training camp until at night time. He can adjust. You got to make weight, championship weight. It's been an uphill struggle for Ankalaev this whole time. He's annoyed. He's annoyed by all this. It should have been earlier. There shouldn't have been a no contest to Johnny Walker. Well, it should have been a DQ, but that should have been smooth sailing for him. The draw to Jan Blachowicz, setting him back again. There's like irritation on him. Alex Pereira's been trolling him. You're not next. I'll figure out someone else. Leave him to wait. Then he launches it on you in Ramadan. If Ankalaev pulls this off under the emotional duress that he's been under, probably, I'll be singing his praises, and they'll probably do a rematch immediately afterwards, depending on the result of the fight. Obviously, if he destroys him, maybe they won't do it immediately. But I think Ankalaev, I think Pereira wins this. I think he wins this. I don't think Ankalaev's got the punch power offensively to catch Pereira. I think Pereira's low kicks are going to work. We saw Jan Blachowicz did. I think that's going to be a part of his game here. Not as open because of the stances, but I think it's still going to be there for him, and he can switch. I'm going Alex Pereira. I think the jabs to the body while he backs up. Ankalaev's failing to trace punches at him and sort of whiffing over the top with his right hands. Trying to pressure forward. Pereira digs the jab again to the body. I think it's going to be a jab to the body fest. To the fake it left hook as he comes in. Dong. Ankalaev gets dropped. And you know what I'm going to say as a finish? And I can so see this. Because he's had it before with Yuri in the first fight. And he's had it in other fights as well. What I can so see as a finish here is Ankalaev getting dropped. Scurrying in to close the distance to the hips. Pereira digging elbows on him. Side of the ear, side of the ear, side of the ear. Oh, Ankalaev's out. He's out. Ref, side of the ear. Little hammer fist, separate, punch. I think we're going to see that. I think we're going to see Ankalaev get dropped. Oh, shit. Shoot in, try and close the distance to the hips. Elbow to the side of the head, elbow to the side. Elbow, digging it in on him. You know what I mean? In that position. And that's where I think Ankalaev's going to go down. And he separates, lands a couple shoveling shots. Fight's over. I'm going to say round 1. I'm going to put it all on the line and say round 1, Alex Pereira KO. Not too shocking. If you are picking Pereira, you should be picking it first or second. That's when I think it happens. Ankalaev's just not... I think he's got a good game. Look through his career. Rakic, he didn't ragdoll him. He didn't take him down. Walker, not again. Same thing again. Jan Blachowicz, in the later rounds when old man Jan got tired, and you got to consider that the first fight between, or the fight between Pereira and Blachowicz took place at altitude 3 months after he got slept by Adesanya as well, by the way. I actually thought Jan could have won that fight, and that's why it annoys me when people say Khalil did the best against Alex we've ever seen, and I sit there and go, Adesanya beat him and looked good the first fight, and Blachowicz nearly did as well. So this isn't... Don't start saying that about Khalil. You know what I mean? I know he's lame, but people pity his story and stuff. They want to praise him up, and he did have a great performance, don't get me wrong. But again, Pereira was sick. I've seen it. You saw the build-up footage. Coughing, spluttering, wheezing, in the weight-cutting sauna thing. I'm going with Alex Pereira. Then look at Anthony Smith. That's whatever. Anthony Smith is Anthony Smith. He's shit. Then I see Thiago Santos. We go to a decision. Volkan Ozdemir. We go to a decision. Good performance against Volkan Ozdemir. Nikita Krylov. 29-28 competitive close decision. Is Pereira going to be the first guy that Ankalaev mauls and submits or TKOs on the ground of any value whatsoever? Smith, fucking forget about him. He's absolute fucking garbage. I have no idea how Jones took him 5. No idea how Jones took him 5. But I don't think Smith's in any way capable at all as a fighter. And he actually got hurt in that fight, didn't he, Smith? He hurt himself, which is interesting. But, it was Ankalaev that caused it to happen. So it is what it is. Is this going to be the first guy that Ankalaev mauls and defeats? Alex Pereira for the World Championship? Will this be his most impressive performance in his biggest moment? It's a lot to ask for. Whereas for Alex Pereira, will this be just another impressive performance? He's healthy. This ain't him sick against Khalil. Will this be just another one of his very impressive performances against the best fighters in the world? I think it's going to be just another one. Ramadan's big on this. Ramadan is big for this. That is huge in the build-up. The frustration. You can't drink. Training in the day, doing you can't drink. Can't eat at the right times. I know there's windows where you can. And he's already saying online, like, this is going to be a test. This will just make me stronger. This struggle will make me stronger. So it's a struggle then. I'm going Alex Pereira. Alex Pereira, TKO early. Back foot, low kicks, back foot. Ankalaev creeping in. Maybe lands a few shots early and Pereira sort of acknowledges it. End up against the cage and over-unders. Pereira separates. He doesn't really get the position for a takedown. Something like that. Who knows? They separate. Pereira gets to center of the cage again. Jab to the body. Sticks him where he is. Starts to get respect. Doesn't let him back him up as much. Jab to the body again. Ankalaev tries swinging over the top of it but misses. He's trying and time with his right hand. Or you know, he's trying to time his shot as Pereira dips into that body shot a bit more. Dong, jab to the body, dig, jab to the body. Maybe Ankalaev throws a few teeps. Dig, jab to the body. Ankalaev trying to pressure him backwards again. Dig, jab to the body. Oh, it's going to be a jab to the body. No way. Left hook. Gong. Ankalaev slept. Shoots in on the legs. Pereira separates. Elbow to the side of the head. Probably back of the head shots, but they're legal in MMA. Absolutely legal. The referee will allow it to happen. Elbow, separate. Bam, bam, bam. Calls it off. TKO win for Alex Pereira. UFC uses him as leverage against John Jones to say, listen, we don't fucking need you anymore. We can do Tom Aspinall versus Alex Pereira instead. Maybe this pressures Jones to take the fight. Who knows? Maybe this leads the UFC to move on from the Jones fight. You get stripped. We get Tom Aspinall versus Alex Pereira. International Fight Week. Absolute GOAT status on the line for Alex Pereira. Maybe Jones comes back for the winner. For a real payday. It just makes sense. Sometimes it just makes sense. You know, sometimes it just makes sense. Aspinall mauls Pereira. Destroys him in a round. Everyone's like, this was this boogeyman. Aspinall just fucking rugby tackled him and submitted him. You know what I mean? Like, and then we move on and Aspinall gets the Jones fight. Fucking blitzes him and destroys him as well. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. We'll see what happens. Toodle pip. Goodbye.